Okay, and yeah, let's get started.
Right, before starting, can I have questions?
Definitely. Go ahead.
Okay.
So this will be recorded and uploaded. Like, can I turn off my video?
Yeah.
Please?
If you're not comfortable with the recording, you can turn your video off. That's completely fine. But if you are okay with that, please feel free to turn your videos on, type in the chat, private message one of us, just, be really informal with it. But yeah.
Yeah. I guess we are ready now to start.
Mhm.
So to begin with, we have a small question for you. So what part of the CRAAP test or ARL you find most difficult or confusing? So don't be shy, don't hesitate to share your opinion. Again, you can just write it through the Zoom chat, or you can unmute yourself and voice your opinion.
Yeah.
So we'll just give you a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, or even kind of on top of this, like, what do you guys find maybe challenging about finding sources? What part of finding sources have you found to be, irritating, or you've been confused by it? You haven't been able to evaluate what a good source is, what a bad source is. What have you guys found difficult, really? What has been really annoying? So because authority, or the authority part of it, yeah, that part of it is a pain, I understand.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anything to do with your ARLs? Because I see we have a lot of AC1 students here, if I'm not mistaken. Anything to do with your ARLs that has confused you? Being critical about the information? Yeah, that is not a fun part.
Yes.
All the good sources are not accessible. Well, Paul, this is an interesting conundrum here. We'll see how we can help you out with that as well.
We'll definitely discuss all of those parts throughout the workshop.
Yeah.
Hope that will be helpful for you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anything that you found confusing or difficult with your ARL, with your CRAAP test, with your sources, maybe? But yeah, we do have a couple of really valid questions here, which we'll get to kind of through the course of this workshop. But yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinion. I think we'll move on here. So today's agenda, we have four key parts, four key areas we want to discuss with you. First one will be how to find sources. Then we'll move to what are good and bad sources, and what the CRAAP test is, how to incorporate those sources in a paper, and then how to use the CRAAP test information in your ARLs.
Yeah.
So to start with, is part number one, finding sources. And Hayati will explain more about that.
Yeah. So this is kind of the preliminary part of your research, right? This is where you need to get started with figuring out, even figuring out what your topic is. This needs to be drawn from your sources, right? And I'll kind of get to that later as well. But this is also the place where a lot of students get confused, kind of, because all of a sudden you've been put into a situation and you're told, hey, go find an academic source, or go find credible sources with which you can back this up. And, where to find them can be really confusing, just like right off the bat. So, and we do have a lot of students at PAW come up to us and be like, well, I couldn't find a source for this, or I don't know where to find sources. So this is to kind of help you out with that. The first thing you need to do when looking for sources is to do a bit of preliminary background research on your topic itself. So your general background. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is a Google search. Right off the bat, see what is happening with your topic, see if you can read about, if it's a historical event, see if you can read about the general background. Just kind of get the basics of your topic in line so that you can do deeper, more specific research later. But it's always a good idea to start with a preliminary search. Then another place you can also go in your kind of search for sources is news articles, right? And news articles you want to be wary about because, as Paul will get to later, they are very, very susceptible to bias. But you can use them as part of preliminary research to kind of see what the general discourse on the topic is, what the general conversation about your topic is right now. And then a relatively more controversial kind of preliminary source is Wikipedia. Now, I know what everyone says in that you're not supposed to cite Wikipedia ever. Like, don't do it. Bad idea. This is because Wikipedia is open access. And anyone, not anyone, but it is relatively easy to edit a Wikipedia article if you have qualifications on the topic, which is why people say don't cite Wikipedia itself directly. But in doing preliminary background research, Wikipedia is not a terrible idea because you can look at the sources that Wikipedia articles have cited and kind of go from there. Because, like I said earlier, because you do need a certain amount of qualifications to be able to edit an article, most of the things that are cited will probably be academic sources, and you can go from there. So just recap, if you're looking at preliminary research before you get into your specifics, Google searches, news articles, and Wikipedia are really good places to start. Does anyone have any other ways that they like to do preliminary research, Paul?
Not sure. A lot of students, they tend to just find the sources that could be more popular, than academic. So maybe that was another part, but I think it would be considered as part of a Google search.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so then let's look at the kinds of sources that you're going to be finding. And the big one, the most credible, the one that your professors will encourage you to use most, are these things called academic journals. You're going to hear peer-reviewed journals. You're going to hear scholarly articles. These are all different terms for academic journals. And the big deal about academic journals, the reason that your professors are going to be like, find an academic source for this, find a scholarly source for this, is because they are peer-reviewed. And peer reviewing is basically how, so an academic journal is where you submit an article and you yourself have to be qualified. So the people writing for academic journals are generally qualified in their field to begin with. And then they submit an article or a research paper to the journal. And what is special here is that it gets peer reviewed. So people who are similarly qualified in that field will edit it. They will provide suggestions. They will provide feedback. If it's, if the research isn't up to mark, they'll say, so they'll send it back to you. You revise it, you look at it again, or they'll reject it, or you revise it and then you send it back to them. And then they can send it back to you again. So it's a whole back and forth. But what happens here is that they ensure that the research is unbiased, that it is well carried out, all of that. So that's why peer-reviewed journals are kind of up there in terms of the most credible research that you can find. So there are a lot of academic journals out there, but you'll know if they're peer-reviewed or not by what we call so they should be on databases that kind of compile articles from different scholarly journals. And that brings me to the next slide, which is databases, how to use them and how to get access to them, which is another issue that came up in the chat. All the good sources are not accessible. So if you are lucky enough to be on campus, TIU has subscriptions to TNF, Taylor and Francis, to JSTOR, if I'm not mistaken, to EBSCO, Science Direct, Emerald Publishing, all of those. So if you're on university Wi-Fi, you can probably get access to these. If you're not, unfortunately, you are going to be a little more limited in terms of what you can find and what you can't. There are other ways in which you can gain access to scholarly articles and books. So those are also, other means that can be looked at, but TIU does provide you with access to most of these sources. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to mention here, so throughout the whole workshop, we'll be providing several sources, and although the links to those sources are written on the screen here, I will also be sending them through the Zoom chat, so you can all like copy and save them for later to use it whenever you need to. So just make sure to save them for later.
Yeah, and there's one in the chat right now. Okay, and then once you've kind of figured out what kind of source you're looking for, the next issue that students come across is that their search results aren't matching what they think they're searching for, right? So like, well, I put in my search criteria, but then it's either a bunch of random things, or it's a bunch of really specific things, or it's not related to my topic at all. And then students kind of get stumped there. So the first really, really, really big tip that I would give anyone looking for sources is to severely narrow down your search criteria. Because you have to understand, people are publishing on one topic all the time, every day, multiple people, different parts of the same topic. It's definitely not that there isn't any research on your topic. It's that there's way too much, right? Academics from all around the world, people from all around the world are publishing on, climate change, right? And different parts of climate change. So generally, what this comes down to is an issue of your search criteria not being specific enough, okay? And what you have to do here is use very, very, very specific terms, so not too broad, and also do keyword searches. So if you've written an abstract, or if you've taken AC2, you know that specific keywords in your topic act as buzzwords that will get flagged when you are searching for something. Use keywords when you are searching. Then again, don't be too broad, but also be wary of confirmation bias. Be careful that you haven't come up with a topic and you are now trying to find sources to support your point of view. Your point of view needs to come from the existing research on the topic and not the other way around. You get what I mean? Because especially for your argumentative papers, which I know is what a lot of students are writing right now, students tend to have a specific point of view on a contentious issue and then find sources to support that. It makes for more credible research if you start from, like I said, the general background information on your topic, look at what both sides of the debate are, and then draw your conclusions, and then look for research on it. So don't go the other way around. Yeah. Paul, anything you want to add on the topic of finding sources or looking for sources in general?
I think you covered that pretty nicely. So
Really?
I think we can move forward to advanced search.
Yeah. So then what we wanted to do is give you examples of how to narrow down your search criteria. So if you are looking for, let me start on the right. If you are looking for kind of a very, very specific topic, and or rather if you're looking for a very specific phrase, quotation marks will make sure nothing gets cut out when you're searching for something. It will look for that same exact phrase. Similarly, if you are trying to exclude something, if you put a dash or a minus symbol, that will let you exclude something. If you are looking for specific file types or specific sites. So you've probably heard in ART that .org or .gov websites will give you different search criteria to .com websites. You can narrow it down by using the site criteria. And in general, Google's advanced search page will let you narrow down your search criteria far more thinly and more specifically. Yeah, and the link to this project again is in the chat. Yep.
Okay, and I think we're now ready to move to our second part, where we will discuss what are good and bad sources. So we have actually another question for you here. How to identify if a source is good or bad, and we just want to hear your own opinion on that. So don't be shy, don't hesitate to share that with us.
So everyone, how do you guys identify if a source is good or if a source is bad? So you see it on your laptop, you pull it up after like a Google search or TNF search. What goes through your mind when you're trying to evaluate if it's a good source or a bad source or an A source? What do you guys think?
Can I speak something?
Sorry?
Can I say an opinion?
Yeah, of course.
Definitely.
So I think the good or bad source is that if this information is reliable or not. Like for example, every source can come anywhere, but if the evidence, the sources is based, if the sources is based on the information and from some scientific information or some college or some very college that is very reliable, I think it's a good source. But if the bad source that comes from some have some biased information or personal opinion on it, I think it's a bad type source.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for your opinion. All good points you mentioned there. And I also got another private message saying that if the author is biased, and I guess that would obviously be considered a bad source as well. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing for your answers here. And yeah, the obvious answer is you need to always CRAAP test your sources. And basically with the CRAAP test, you will be able to check any possible source you find. And what CRAAP stands for is currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. And all of those parts are very crucial, very important. You cannot neglect any of those. And one of the very useful, important suggestions here is always remember to try apply critical skills to the information you find during the CRAAP test. So it could be critical thinking skills, it could be critical analysis skills, and I will cover that topic more deeply in the upcoming slides in the upcoming workshop. So first of all, speaking in general about the CRAAP test, what it is and how to conduct the CRAAP test in general, we have, as I mentioned, 5 very important sections here. And you need to remember that every section can be worth 10 points. So you can conduct it with the score. And you, while answering the questions, you will give score for the answers to each part separately, and then just sum them up. And in total, you will receive a score. So if it is in the range from 45 to 50, the source is considered excellent. So it's perfect, it's credible. Sorry about that. And if you got from 40 to 44, it's still good. From 35 to 39, on average, but you can still use it. 30 to 34 is considered as borderline acceptable. So you still are able to use that source, but then you just might consider asking yourself why you still want to use the source rather than just maybe finding a more credible, more reliable, more relevant one. So the score is very important as well. So let's just go through all of these sections separately and discuss each of those. So first we'll start with currency. You might ask several questions here. So, for example, when was the information published or posted? Has the information been revised or updated? Is the information current or out of date for your topic? And are the links functional? So, of course, while you are conducting the test initially, you can decide to answer all of those questions. But another thing is that we'll cover further down the workshop is how to apply that information effectively into your annotation paragraphs, into your ARL. And in that case, it won't be a very good idea to try to answer every single question under all of those categories and just copy and paste the information you found in the paragraph. So we'll discuss that uh, later. Then the second part is relevance or importance. So I would say one of the most crucial parts of the CRAAP test you need to identify and answer. So does the information relate to your topic or answer your question? Who is the intended audience? Is the information at an appropriate level? For example, it's not too elementary or advanced for your needs. Have you looked at a variety of sources before actually determining this one you will use? And would you be comfortable using this source for a research paper? And answering this particular category in terms of relevance will actually help you immensely when you will be writing your paragraphs in ARL, because then you can state particularly how it is relevant and how you can apply that information to your specific topic. Then we'll move to authority or the source. So uh, just general questions. Who is the author, publisher, source, and sponsor? What are the author's credentials or organizational affiliations? Are they given at all? What are the author's qualifications to write on the topic? And is there any contact information, for example, publisher, email address? And does the URL reveal anything about the author or the source? Then comes accuracy or reliability. So where does the information comes from? Is the information supported by evidence? Has the information been reviewed or refereed? Can you verify any of the information in another source or from your personal knowledge? And does the language or tone seem biased and free of emotion? So a lot of you mentioned bias before, and this is a very important part as well of identifying whether the source is bad or good, because usually when you find out that the source contains any bias at all, I don't think that would be a very good source to choose from or to use. So be careful about that. And as Hayati mentioned before, a lot of sources which are not that academic, for example, some of the news articles and other popular articles, they are usually considered a lot of times biased. So be very careful about that. And moving a little bit back to the last question of the authority. So does the URL reveal anything? I want to explain a bit more here. So the general URL for the website, for the article, it can also contain a very important, useful information for you. For example, if the URL is just .com or any other oftenly used websites, web sources, it might be not as credible, not as accurate as some other ones. For example, if you encounter .edu or .gov, those sources will most likely be much more credible. Uh, they will have much more authority than the other ones because they are usually academic or governmental sources. So you would most likely your CRAAP test will have like a good score on those. And the last part will be purpose or reason. So what is the purpose of the information? to inform, to teach, sell, entertain, persuade. And answering the question will help you to identify again, is the source good or bad? If it is only for entertaining and it doesn't very well relate to your topic, you might consider switching that. Do the authors or sponsors make their intentions or purpose clear? Is the information fact, opinion, or propaganda? Does the point of view appear objective and impartial? And this both of these questions about opinion, propaganda, objective, and partial can also contain bias and talk about bias. So be very careful about that as well. And are there political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, or personal biases here? So again, let me share the link with you.
Right. So if you've gone through kind of ART, especially, you've probably been taken through the CRAAP test extensively. But the thing about the CRAAP test is that it doesn't really stop there. Like, I still look at these things when I'm trying to evaluate how credible a source may or may not be. In general, it's just a really useful method of evaluating sources. And I just wanted to add something to what Paul was saying earlier in terms of using the CRAAP test, yes, but also applying your own critical skills. Something that's going to be really important for you guys who are writing your argumentative papers is being aware of logical fallacies. And we don't have the time to fully go through that today. So I am going to put a link in the chat that will help you identify logical fallacies, how to spot your own, how to spot them in other research, and kind of work around them or learn to recognize them. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for adding that. And I think we can move to our next part, which is about incorporating sources. And Hayati will explain more about that.
Right. Does anyone have any questions up until now about the CRAAP test, about searching for sources and search criteria? Is anyone confused about this? About how Paul explained how to tally up the kind of grade that you would get on the CRAAP test? Do we have any questions so far? Anyway, feel free to type in the chat. Yep, unmute yourselves.
If you don't have any questions for now, don't worry, because we'll move to more specifics in the later parts, and we'll also have a brief Q&A, like discussion session at the end. So if you come up with anything further during the workshop, we'll still like give you some time at the end to discuss and answer those questions.
Yeah. Okay. So moving forward, so once you've found your sources and then you've evaluated your sources, the next part is how you are going to incorporate these sources into your paper. So in terms of the mechanics, like how am I going to put them in there? How am I going to cite them? APA is what we generally use especially for AC and ART. And so APA sense is essentially the style of referencing other people's work that is created and used by the American Psychological Association. It was made with the intention of providing social scientists, especially psychologists, anthropologists, with a standardized way to attribute sources to the people who wrote them. And it's, like I said, it's largely used in social sciences. APA is essentially, it provides you with how to cite, yes, but it also provides you with formatting guides as to the headers and the headings and the structure of your headings, spacing, page numbers, all of that. And so what I am going to do now is, and I'm sure all of you have heard extensively about Purdue OWL. Use Purdue OWL. Look, you don't know how to cite this, check Purdue OWL. So let me help you out with this. Let me share my screen real quick. Purdue OWL, if everyone can see my screen, is it. So just to get started, The general format of how to incorporate sources is given here under the APA section. Font, title pages, headers and footers, all of that is under this section. And then when you are looking at incorporating your sources in the body of your paper itself, that is your in-text citation, and then basic guidelines are over here in terms of, last name, comma, year, whether you put it within brackets, whether you make it part of your sentence. Then this part covers how many authors you're going to be citing in your paper. And then when it comes to your reference list, it really depends on what kind of source you're working with, because there's different ways to cite different kinds of sources. And yeah, that is pretty much how to navigate Purdue OWL. Yeah, Paul, if you could grab the slides back. There you go. Yeah, so that is citations and general formatting. But then you look at where in the actual in your actual writing you put in your sources. It is really, really useful to come back to the Texas paragraph hamburger here, right? And so just a very brief run through, because I'm sure you guys have already covered this in great detail. You start with your topic sentence, you explain it, you put in an example, you put in an analysis, and then you summarize your entire paragraph. Can anyone tell me where in the Texas paragraph structure you put in your sources? At which stage do you add in your sources? Yeah, exactly. So even within your body paragraph, yes, it is within the X, for example. That's where your sources go, right? And then, like, as the slide points out, yes, in your example, exactly. You need to make sure that you don't only put in your source. Your sources always need to be sufficiently analyzed and well fleshed out. You need to explain why you have used this source in your paper. How is it relevant? What is your takeaway from this source going to be? So a lot of students kind of have initial difficulty with especially the analysis part. What does this mean? What am I analyzing? Am I analyzing the source? Am I analyzing, how credible the source is within my paragraph? But the analysis essentially analyzes your evidence, and it looks at its relevance in your paper. It looks at how this source supports your argument or your idea, or your, for a cause and effect paper, whether it supports the relationship that you are showing between the cause and the effect. That all falls under your analysis. So if you're taking AC2, you know that you can go example analysis, example analysis, example analysis, but they always need to kind of complement each other. Okay, and that is pretty much the Texas paragraph.
Yeah, and I'm gonna again send a link to this paragraph image to the Zoom chat. And then we'll move on to our last part of the workshop, which is how to use the information you've obtained from the CRAAP test in your ARL effectively. First of all, in general, I think most of you are very familiar with the ARL, or at least you should be. And I think you are almost done with your first ARL, but you need to remember that ARL is not only a part of your ART class, which is during your first semester, but it is also a very crucial part of writing your essay in AC2 during your second semester. And it is very important to remember because during your AC2 class, you will actually most likely have a very little time compared with your ART class to actually conduct and write the whole ARL itself, and you will most likely have more sources to cover. So you need to be aware of that and practice. So answering CRAAP test questions is one thing, but applying that information to your annotation paragraphs is completely different. And I will talk about that more deeply here. And a lot of this will refer back to the CRAAP test I was talking about previously. So it is very closely connected together. So how to effectively explain aspects of the CRAAP test on your ARL assignments. Here are a couple of very useful suggestions, tips for you. So first of all, do not just list the information you found or copy the answers to the questions from the CRAAP test, because in that case, again, as I mentioned before, you are not applying that critical skills, that critical knowledge, and you are not expressing your own opinion on the relevance to your topic. And here comes the second tip. So always remember to apply those critical skill thinking and critical analysis skills to clearly explain why that information is important and relevant for your particular paper or particular topic. And in doing that, do not be afraid to write from a first person view and express your own opinion, because sometimes students are confused after writing the academic essays for, let's say, AAC1. They are a little bit afraid to use a first person view here to express their own knowledge. So these assignments are different from each other. And one of the main reasons you actually do ARL, one of the main goals of it is to state your own understanding and very clearly, specifically express how the information and the source you are using is relevant to your paper and why is it credible. And in that case, the first person view suits perfectly here. And then URL consists of three different parts, which are summary, evaluation, and application, and several suggestions on how to express your opinion in each of those parts. So for your summary part, you can refer to what general ideas are relevant to your topic from the source. So after conducting the whole summary, usually at the end, you can just provide a very concise, clear explanation of why do you think these general ideas or what general ideas are relevant to your topic. By saying that, you will show your understanding of the whole like summary and the connection between the ideas from the source you are using to the topic you decided to choose. Then comes the evaluation paragraph, and there you will actually decide what information you want to include. So for example, as I mentioned before, there are tons of different questions in terms of currency, in terms of authorities there. So if you decide to answer each and every one of those and just include that into your paragraphs, into your ARLs, it might not be that efficient because a lot of information might not be that relevant. So you need to decide for yourself which specific information is mostly relevant to your topic, to your paper. So for example, it could be author's major. If the author was studying topic he's writing about, that means he has a decent needed qualification to write on the topic, and you can again connect that to your topic and state that that is why this information is relevant to show the author's qualification. Then we have a date of publishing or date when it was written. Make sure again it is closely connected to your research question, to your topic. Sometimes it's not about currency, it's just about the time period. For example, if you decided to talk about the past times, some older days, and in that case, if you decide to choose the article that's not very current, but talks about that specific time period you will be discussing in your topic, again, just explain that in your paragraph and it will be relevant. And the last part will be like any other works written by the author, any other research done by the author, and again, explain why the information is relevant. If there are several sources, several other articles, several other research done by the author on the topic that is, again, very closely connected to yours, you can mention that and explain the connection. And the last part is the application part. And here it is the main part where you actually should dive more deeply into the specifics, refer to like particular examples or quotes to state where you will be able to use the data, particularly in your paper, in your essay. And here it might sound a bit confusing. So I have a specific example here. So example of an application paragraph. Here, the author decided to include some of the in-text citations. And after each of the citations, I've underlined a couple of sentences where the author actually provides his own explanation on why he decided to include this citation and where exactly he will try to use it. So, for example, I can use this information in the second body paragraph of my descriptive essay to talk about integration of new technologies in the analytical sphere and show that the future of analytics includes new technologies. So from just this sentence, we can see that the author has a very good understanding of where he will put the information in the essay, and he has a very good understanding of how the source he chose is actually connected and relevant to the topic and essay he will be writing about. And the next sentence is, I will use this quote to show how valuable AI can become in the sphere. I will also compare these abilities to current human analytics and come to a conclusion whether AI can fully replace human workers in the analytical sphere or not. So again, from this, we can see a very specific, very clear understanding of how the author can use these specific examples in their essay. And that means he has already done a pretty good outline of the whole paper, and he knows what specific paragraph will talk about this topic and why exactly he can apply that information in the specific topic. And yeah, this is the end of our parts of the workshop. So now I guess you have some questions, maybe concerns to ask. So we'll hold like a brief Q&A discussion. You can share your thoughts with us, ask us any questions, again, like through Zoom chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask those questions directly to us. Don't hesitate to do that. We are happy to answer all of them.
Joe, can I say something? So sorry.
Definitely, go ahead.
Well, like I was good to maybe have a review, some kind of a review that I studied before, and I think it's very useful because I have some problem researching the information, and I found it. I remember again that it is really important to have a CRAAP test and then find the right source or believable sources.
Do you think you could rephrase your question for me, if you don't mind, just so I can make sure that I got it?
I will say one more time. So I think it was good to review the problem.
If you're having issues with kind of loud surroundings, you can also kind of type in the chat, but do go ahead. Yep. But also in the meantime, anyone else, any questions to do with your ARLs, finding sources, what is a good source, what is not a good source, what have you had trouble with? Yep, glad we could help you with reviewing that information. What have you guys struggled with or found difficult or found annoying with everything we've covered? Sources, you know, how to incorporate them maybe. So, you know, citations or the text structure. Does anyone have any questions that they'd want to ask? Okay, so Sarah, you have your hand raised. Do you want to go ahead?
I actually had a question about Moodle turn-in.
Mhm.
Can I ask that?
Yeah.
So when I turned in my essay in Moodle turn-in, even if I did the citation all correctly with APA format, they were still showing that it's not correct. It's not from the source I cited from. It's from a different source. So I cited it again from the source they are talking about, but they're showing that it's still wrong. Like I have been having this problem for when I turn it in on Moodle.
Okay,
What can I do
so it's
about
getting
that?
flagged as plagiarism, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is usually fine if you've cited it properly, if it's a direct quotation, if you've put it within quotation marks and then given the author and the year and the page number or the paragraph number, then you're fine. Then it's just getting pulled up anyway. If it is a paraphrase or a summary and that's getting flagged, maybe you haven't paraphrased it well enough. Is a possibility.
It was mostly based on the ones that I directly quoted on.
Okay.
Not the ones that I paraphrased.
Right.
And yeah.
If it's mainly your direct quotations, then it's fine if they're properly cited, because your lecturer will be able to go through it and see, oh, okay, this is mainly Turnitin's fault, like she's cited everything properly. So in that scenario, you're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
yeah. And definitely just from my own experience, I had this issue in every single essay and every single paper I did when I submitted on Turnitin. So it's not a big deal. Just make sure that's not like a paraphrase or summary. If it is a direct citation, you're fine. Yeah,
okay,
and we
that's
have a couple.
a relief.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. And we have a couple more questions in the chat. So what is a scholarly source and can who be considered scholarly?
Okay. Paul, do you want to head back to the peer-reviewed journal side?
Definitely.
Okay, so a scholarly source is basically a peer-reviewed source, an academic source. It is just, sorry if anyone heard me do this whole thing a while back, but it's basically any source that is peer-reviewed, that is published in an academic journal. And can the World Health Organization be considered scholarly? I would kind of lean towards yes, but that again depends on what kind of WHO article it is, or what kind of research was conducted. Again, aspects of the CRAAP test, really. But I would say on the whole, the World Health Organization can be considered scholarly, but take it on a case-by-case basis. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly that. I think nothing to add about like the scholarly sources. I think we can move to the next question.
Yeah.
So this is more general, but if the purpose of a source is propaganda, how does I present that within my ART? Or what do I say? So this is a very good question. Let me just go to the CRAAP test again here. So that will come as your answer to one of the questions here. And if it contains a very strong propaganda, I think the first question you would ask yourself is, can the source be considered credible enough? Because if, again, it contains any strong biases, any strong propaganda, it might not be considered as credible. But if it is, let's say, only a minor thing in the whole paper, for example, a paper is very long, and within like uh, several parts of the paper, not many, you encountered some of the propaganda or biases, but it's not a big deal because the paper is long and the main ideas are not very closely connected to those propaganda ideas. I think in that case, you can still use the source, because if the other parts of the CRAAP test are considered credible enough, in terms of how do you present that within your ART, again, you decide by yourself what information to present in your paragraphs. So if it is a minor thing, you can decide not to present that it contains like any of the propaganda at all, and that would be fine as long as you explain all of this, those like other parts effectively enough. Although again, like if it contains a very strong bias or propaganda, I don't think it would be a good idea for you to choose that source in the first place. So
But
that would
there's
be
also the
the answer.
possibility that you want to use the source kind of as an example of what propaganda on the topic looks like, for example, in which case what you have to do is you can just make it very explicit that this source does contain very strong signs of bias, that it is, propagandistic in what it is conveying. In that instance, I think what you have to do is be as straightforward and explicit with it as possible. Just say that in terms of purpose, this was clearly created with the purpose of it being propaganda, and here is why. So as long as you are kind of explicit with that, you can present it within your ARL if it's for that purpose. If you're going to do what Paul said and take a form of propaganda and present it as the world's greatest source, that might be problematic. But if you're using it as an example of a biased source, then just be sure to point that out.
Same as I mentioned before about the timeline. If you decide to, if you decide to use like an older source and your topic actually covers that time period, it's fine because it strongly is strongly connected with your goal. Same here. If your topic and your goal is to like share examples of propaganda and you find that example, that's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, glad we could help you. Does anyone else have any questions? Anything to do with the CRAAP test, with sources, finding sources especially has been a big one. Anything to do with sources that we can help you out with? Anything in general with ART that has just been kind of confusing? Okay, so we're going to keep the meeting open. We're definitely, the Q&As are happening, we still have questions, but in case you are having your attendance for this workshop recorded, we are going to give you a QR code here that will lead you to a form, and when you fill it out, your attendance will get recorded. This will only be available for a limited period of time after the workshop ends, so be sure to fill it out as soon as you can. But if you want specific feedback on your assignments, on your specific papers, on your ARL, feel free to come to PAW. You can book a one-on-one session with me or Paul or anyone else, and you can just have a fresh set of eyes to look at your paper for you. Our recordings of this workshop and of other workshops that the PAWs have held are on YouTube, so please check those out. And yeah, make sure you fill in your attendance form. Yeah, there's the link to our YouTube channel because we're cool like that.
Yeah, definitely be sure to subscribe to that, like some of our videos, and check all of those workshop recordings there.
But
Uh,
we're definitely still open for questions if anyone has any concerns.
Yeah, definitely. But overall, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for coming and for your questions, for listening. We really do appreciate that. We truly hope that the workshop, you find that very helpful and the information will be useful for you in your future assignments and the current ones.
Yeah,
So
thank you guys.
definitely good luck with
Oh, I do
those.
have a private, I do have a private message in the chat about how do you write the authority section in your ARL. Paul, take it away. Oh wait, one thing that I do want to say on that is that
Okay.
make sure that you aren't copying and pasting their qualifications from an author's website onto your paper. Make sure you're writing it out yourself. But go on, Paul.
Yeah, so in terms of the authority, you see a lot of questions here are connected about the general information about the publisher, about the author, about their contact information. And I was explaining that here, how to effectively use that information in your evaluation paragraph. So you can decide by yourself what specific questions from the authority part of the CRAAP test you will use in this evaluation paragraph. And again, it could be author qualifications, publishers, information. If you think that information is relevant to your paper, if the, let's say, author's majors, qualifications are closely connected to your topic and to that research in general, you can include that information in that evaluation paragraph. And again, like after explain, state why exactly is it relevant. So those part will just be like a specific part of the evaluation paragraph. Yeah, I'm gonna show the QR code again.
Yeah, and just in case if the QR code isn't working for anybody, I am going to give you a link that should work. Give me a second. So this should work. It'll only be available for a limited amount of time after the workshop ends. So be sure you fill it out ASAP. Yeah, so in response to a private message that I had, the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is what Paul has put in the chat just above. The recording will be up. Don't worry about that. There's also recordings of previous workshops if you want to check those out as well. But no, there will be a recording of this posted. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No worries.
So write this form and upload it.
Sorry?
So write the form,
Yes,
attendance form.
fill the form out. Yeah, either scan the
Yep.
QR code or there's a link to it in the chat.
Yep, then I finished it, so it's over if I finished it.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't have any questions, anything to ask, you're free to leave. Thank you very
Great
much
day.
again for coming.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
If
very
you
much.
do have any questions, Paul and I are still here to answer any concerns that you have. So
Yeah.
please feel free. But otherwise,
Thank
no
you for
worries.
coming. Yeah, and again, make sure to save all the links I sent through the chat,
Yeah.
because most of those materials are made by our PAW team. So we are glad to help out as many students as we can. So definitely save those materials for later. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much again
Yeah.
for coming.
Thank you, guys. Okay. All right. On that note, if we don't have any other questions, we're going to be ending here. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming, and hopefully we'll see you soon at PAW or at a future workshop, maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much again.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.